Right now, we run into a lot of people, and here's a young lady that is, you were living in Tahir Square, out in there, Egypt. What brings you out here to an Occupy Oakland action?
Well, I was...
And first of all, what's your name?
Okay, my name is Jema. I am an Egyptian activist. I joined the Egyptian uprising since day one and until October, and then I came to the US and I became involved in Occupy Wall Street in New York. And then I was so interested in learning more about different occupations. That's why I came to Occupy Oakland and Occupy San Francisco.
What's it been like? How would you compare what was going on in Egypt? Because a lot of people reference Egypt as inspiration for them. How do you see the two?
Well, I guess people got a false impression about what happened in Egypt because they stopped following the Egyptian uprising right after Mubarak resigned, and I personally think that we started the revolution right after he resigned. We still have a long time of fighting and struggling back in Egypt, so it wasn't really the most successful, beautiful uprising in the entire region. But I still think that what inspired people about Egypt is the fact that ordinary and average people who have never been politically active before can do something.
The amount of brutality that we've seen, especially after Mubarak left, seems to be one that's caught a lot of people by surprise. Can you talk about that? Because the way it was presented to us here in the States was that the people in Tahir Square were kind of proud of the army because these were brothers and sisters and average working class folks who were members of it, but then that army seemed to be just as bad at one point.
So basically, I was actually detained by the army myself 1 week before Mubarak resigned. So the army wasn't on our side since the first day, but you couldn't see this on media. The US keeps supporting the Egyptian army maybe since 1979 with $1.3 billion a year. So that's why you're not gonna get to see anything against the army on the US media. But the army wasn't on our side from the beginning, and that's why they have been attacking peaceful protests since February, March, April until October, but the US media just didn't cover it. So
I hear that. So where does it stand now? We just had elections. There's a concern that Islamic forces, I hate to use that word, Islamic forces are now going to rule Egypt, if Islam rules, so what? But you tell me how you feel. What's the goal, or how's the political landscape looking?
I personally am totally against having any kind of elections right now in Egypt. Basically because the system is still there. Egypt is still a military dictatorship, and it's just like having elections down under Mubarak's ruling. So the Supreme Council of Armed Forces that was appointed by Mubarak is in power. They're controlling media, they're controlling everything. So, this election is completely, I guess, it's not the best time to have any kind of elections, especially with the security situation and the fact that the National Democratic Party of Mubarak is running for elections. The same old guard are running for elections, the Muslim Brotherhood, and there's no place for people like me, for example, or the youth or independent activists. So
really, no place for
you don't have the fund, you don't have the money to fund your campaigns. People do not really know about you. You don't have media outlets to speak. So that the revolutionary activists are becoming opposition to the same regime that is still there.
Is the U.S. and Israel, are they sticking their necks into this election? Are they trying to influence it one way or the other?
Well, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces is one of the best friends of U.S. government and Israel. Based on the peace treaty that we have with Israel, we receive all this money from the U.S. just to secure Israel. So I don't really think that this upcoming parliament will have any power over this.
Okay, and then, what lessons do you think that folks that are in the Occupy movement, especially since you were down on Wall Street, you're out here in Oakland tonight and other places, what lessons can we learn from what you all did, and what lessons have you learned from us?
What I really want people here to reconsider is having a network of connections, or you could say an infrastructure of, you could say, connecting all the occupations together and having strong roots. When I was here back in November, and I asked people about some day of action that was happening in Occupy Wall Street in New York. They had no idea something was happening. And I was like, I thought that you guys are somehow connected and you are working on something together rather than just like going in different directions. So that's my advice. People need to be much more connected to each other. And what I learned about Occupy is the way I really like the way people document everything that happens. We really suffer from this back in Egypt. When you can't really make it to the news, the state TV in Egypt is controlled by the army. You need to have some kind of an alternative source.
Right.
And that's what people here are doing. And I really want to copy this when I go back to Egypt.
When do you go back?
I have no idea.
Okay. You know, one of the things that has been troublesome is what we didn't really know about Egypt. For a lot of people, people have gone to Egypt and come back, seeing the pyramids, and nobody ever talked about the political conditions and the poverty. And in particular, a lot of black folks. Where were the black folks in Egypt? We don't really see them on the TV. What's their plight? How are they getting along with folks? How are they being treated? And, you know, and how was it that when folks were here, were making pilgrimages to Egypt / Kemet, that they didn't come back and, you know, necessarily talk about all the poverty and all the stuff that was going on there?
Well, basically, there's such a big gap between, you could say, the upper part of Egypt, the south, and like other parts, like the big major cities like Cairo and Alexandria and the Delta. In upper Egypt, where like the majority of, like, I mean, the farther you go down, you could see like the majority of black Egyptians are kind of like concentrated more in upper Egypt. And it's like you have the biggest rate of poverty and lack of services, and during Mubarak's time, he didn't really care much for like the development in upper Egypt and stuff. So you have.
So the upper Egypt is where the black folks live.
Yeah,
right.
Which is the south.
Okay.
So I mean, Cairo is kind of like so very mixed, so you can see like people from different backgrounds. But mostly in like Luxor and Aswan, people are like they're darker. And basically the way, I mean, the Egyptian society is somehow xenophobic. People do not really get to speak to like foreigners. As long as you're not working in tourism or dealing with foreigners, people are so very xenophobic. So you won't really get to know much about the situation. You could say the sociological situation or poverty or politics, because people are so afraid.
Okay. So where do things stand now? You know, will we see more of a black presence as things move on in terms of trying to get change? Will we see people sitting at the table? Because it was almost absent from the TV. You're looking and you're going, aren't there folks there? You know,
Yeah.
what's going on?
I mean, thing is, like, the Egyptian state TV is not really representing to any, like, the reality of this country. I mean, at some point back in October, they were pushing us to a civil war between Christians and Muslims. So it's not like a reliable source of information.
Okay. What about women? What's the role of women right now in Egypt?
Well, I don't really like it when like people in the Western world start to kind of like address women and minority and like people of different ethnicity in a specific way or like a special way. It's like, oh, you have a special situation.
All right.
You are oppressed. You are suffering. When the fact is the entire system is just oppressive to everyone else. Everyone, like every faction of this society is oppressed, whether they were women or men, black or white, from Upper Egypt or North Egypt.
Right. Well, I think people here ask that question because even within oppressed communities, you still have different types of oppression. So African Americans may be oppressed and then turn around and oppress women. So if we get a certain type of freedom or some type of gain, we may still harbor a type of, well, you know, y'all women stay in the back.
Right.
So the question gets asked that way. And oftentimes it's tensions between different ethnic groups.
Right.
You know, so I think at least where I come from, I'm always curious, you know, like, you know, what we hear over here is that, you know, the oppression of women, there's a lot of oppression, women are oppressed. in Middle Eastern countries. So we always got to ask that so you get a clarification, you know,
yeah.
and you got to ask from people that are there, because you know what I might think is oppression isn't. You know, you have people going, oh, you got to wear, you know, a hijab. That must mean you're oppressed, and that's like your choice. So
yeah, I mean, it's really all about like the stereotypes and the preconceived idea that people have about like the situation of women in the Middle East and stuff. But I mean, I didn't personally feel anything different.
Okay.
I had like the same chances as my brother and my other sister. I mean, we were just the same way. We received the same amount of education. I mean, I was even better than my brother in different ways. Okay. So it's not really like how you see it on corporation media. So.
And my last question: where do you see things a year from now in Egypt?
It's hard to tell, and it's hard to expect anything because this uprising was completely unexpected. Okay. So I guess the fight will continue, and the oppression will continue as well from the military side until something happens.
Obama, friend or foe?
Obama what?
Obama, is he a friend or is he a foe?
He's not friend.
He's not friend.
He's supporting the Egyptian military with $1.3 billion. The tear gas, the rubber bullets, and the live ammunition are all made in the U.S. So I don't really think that makes you a friend of the Egyptian people.
Boots, you hear that, man? Didn't Obama give a speech at Cairo?
That's your boy.
Yeah, wow.
Boy.
Wow.
Yeah, you know.
He gave the speech at Cairo and everything, so
that didn't convince me. That wasn't convincing.
Wow.
It's not, actions speak louder, you know?
So Obama's losing points all the way in Egypt, and he gave that big old speech.
Yeah.
He made a lot of speeches, but he bombed a lot more people. We got way more bombings going on in Pakistan during Obama's rule than during George Bush's rule. We're not going to be out of Afghanistan anytime soon. Keep hearing that people are going to pull out of Iraq, and it's not happening.
Wow. Well, I'm just saying, wow. I'm saying if President Obama is watching this, you know, he should take heed. For the young lady that came here from Tahir Square, and you know,
stop sending us money, please. We don't need your money. We don't really need like the $2 billion US dollars.
Stop sending them
Stop
money.
sending money.
Oh, stop sending money.
I mean, you guys need
well, you know,
this money
we need the money here.
Yeah,
maybe this woman wouldn't have her house foreclosed on.
I mean, $2 billion US dollars is big, you know.
Well, that's the lesson, everybody. Stop sending money to Egypt because it goes to the military, and send it to the lady across the street so she can get in her house, and then we come full circle.
Exactly.
All right, well, I'm glad we clarified that, because, you know, they would be telling us we have to send the money to Egypt because y'all needed it. But now we know.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like $1.3 billion out of the $2 billion goes to the military. So, and the military is oppressing people. So it's pretty obvious that it's not really helping at all.
That's real talk.
Following the Egyptian uprising right after Mubarak resigned, and I personally think that we started the revolution right after he resigned. We still have a long time of fighting and struggling back in Egypt, so it wasn't really like the most successful, beautiful uprising in the entire region. But I still think that what inspired people about Egypt is the fact that ordinary and average people who have never been politically active.
Right now, we run into a lot of people, and here's a young lady that is, you were living in Tahir Square, out in there, Egypt. What brings you out here to an Occupy Oakland action?
Well, I was...
And first of all, what's your name?
Okay, my name is Jema. I am an Egyptian activist. I joined the Egyptian uprising since day one and until October, and then I came to the US.
But then that army seemed to be just as bad at one point.
So basically, I was actually detained by the army myself 1 week before Mubarak resigned. So the army wasn't on our side since the first day, but you couldn't see this on media. The US keeps supporting the Egyptian army maybe since 1979 with $1.3 billion a year. So that's why you're not gonna get to see anything against the army on the US media. And I became involved in Occupy Wall Street in New York. And then I was so interested in learning more about different occupations. That's why I came to Occupy Oakland and Occupy San Francisco.
What's it been like? How would you compare what was going on in Egypt? Because a lot of people reference Egypt as inspiration for them. How do you see the two?
Well, I guess like people got a false impression about what happened in Egypt because they stopped following before can do something.
The amount of brutality that we've seen, especially after Mubarak left, seems to be one that's caught a lot of people by surprise. Can you talk about that? You know, I mean, because the way it was presented to us here in the States was that the people in Tahir Square were kind of proud of the army because these were brothers and sisters and average working class folks who were members of it.